Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Batra Daf Yomi. This is the daf for Shabbat. We're going to get started from the very bottom of Yud Zayin Amud. What we're going to do today is have a series of 8 difficulties we're going to raise against Rava from the Mishnah, both our Mishnah and other mishnayot in this chapter. So we're now going to get started with the bottom of Yud Zayin Amud. Marchikim, if you remember, Rava said, okay, let's go back. Haba lismoch b'tzad hametzal. You come to put something next to the border, Rava says you can't do it. Okay, you can't do it because even though there's nothing there, okay, you just can't bring it near. Comes the Mishnah and says, Marchikim, this was the first Mishnah in our chapter, Marchikim et gefet et zevel. Okay, the gefet is the refuse from the olives after we take the oil out. Et zevel, the animal manure, the melach, the salt, the seed, the lime, et slaim, and stones, mikot lo shel chaverosh l'shat vachim. You have to distance it 3 tvachim from your friend's wall. What is osam, seed, or you can plaster it in limestone. Tama dika kotel, haleka kotel somech. But this sounds like only if there's a wall there. If there isn't a wall, it sounds like you don't have to. And Rabba said, even if there's nothing there, you still can't put it near the border. Lo, ki like a kotel nami lo samech, rejection of this difficulty because it's even if there isn't a wall. So, elamai kamashman. So why did it say specifically when there's a wall? Hakamashman dahane kashu lekotel. They wanted you to know that all these things are difficult for a wall. Okay, most of the commentaries think that the issue here is each of them create heat, and because of that, it ruins the wall by the heat. Some people say the stones could be a different issue. Okay, there's different opinions, but we'll move on. Tashma marchikim. Continuing on in that same Mishnah, marchikim et hazra'im et hamacharisha ve'et meraglayim min hakotel shlosha tvachim. You have to distance seeds and a plow, the plowshare, and the implement that they would use for plowing, the meraglayim and urine from a wall 3 tvachim. Again, what do you see here? Tamadika kotel. It sounds like just because there's a wall. Ha'aleka kotel samech. But if there wasn't a wall, then you could put it right up against the wall. Lo. No, in fact, even if there wasn't a wall, you would be able to put near the border. As Rava says, again, reconcile this with Rava. So why is he telling you specifically with the wall? Well, they want you to know that moist things are hard for the wall. Okay, what's moist here? Good question. Zra'im perhaps is moist because people water them. The macharisha is a totally different issue, which comes up later. And the meraglayim is moist. Some people say this is only referring to the urine, okay, and that the moisture causes the wall to deteriorate. Again, what we're going to say for almost all the answers is that the Mishnah is just teaching you something additional, something extra, something we wouldn't have known otherwise, which is, or not that we wouldn't have known otherwise, but that you should keep in mind that these things are bad for walls, okay, or for other things. Tashma, continuing on in that Mishnah. Now you have to move the millstone. The millstone 3 away from the wall. 3 tvachim from the bottom, from the base of it, which ends up 4 tvachim from the top part, because the top part is a smaller stone that goes on top of the larger one, which sits at the base. So since one's a little less wide than the top is a little less wide than the bottom, or the radius is 1 tefach less, so it's 4 from the top part, 3 from the lower. Tamadika kotel. Again, what does it say? You move this from the wall. Tamadika kotel, haleka kotel samech. It sounds like, again, if there wasn't a wall, wouldn't be an issue. Lo, again, difficulty with Rav, who said even if there's no wall, you can't put it near the border. Lo kileta kotel nami lo samech elamai kamashmalan ha kamashmalan ditiria kashela kotel. Wanted you to know that the vibrating element of this millstone is bad for the wall. It weakens the wall. Tashma ve'eta tenur. This is the last case of the Mishnah. Shlosha min hakilya she'en arba'a min hasafa. Again, 3 from the base, which is 4 from the upper part. Because again, it's narrower at the top. Tamadi kakotel, halika kotel samich. Again, all based on moving it away from the wall. Presumably, if there wasn't a wall, it would be fine. Lo kileka kotel nami lo samich. Ve'lamai kamash malan. Ha kamash malan dahavla kashela kotel. Problem is that the heat that's created from the oven is bad for the wall, and that's what it was coming to teach us. Source number 5. Now we're moving on. We finished with our Mishnah. We're moving on to the Mishnah on Daf Kaf. Tashma. לא יפתח אדם חנות של נחתומים ושל צבעים תחת אוצרו של חברו. If your friend on the bottom floor has a storehouse, you can't, on the upper floor has a storehouse, you can't make a store, like a bakery, okay, a store of bread makers, or tzabain, or dyeing, using it for dyeing, underneath your friend's storage area. What's the problem with those two? Because they create smoke, and the smoke is bad for the otzar. Vilo refet bakar. You also can't make it into a place for your cattle because the smell is bad, and the smell will ruin the food that's being stored upstairs. Again, what do you infer from here? Tamadika otzar. It's because there's already an otzar there. Haleka otzar avid. But if there wasn't an otzar yet, and they hadn't used it for anything of the sort, you could put in your bakery downstairs. Well, this could be a different kind of answer. This isn't trying to tell you that these are bad for those things, but dirashani. This is because a house is different. Now, the assumption is that your bakery is part of your house, or your barn where you have your animals is part of your house, or you're dyeing. By the way, what's with the dye? It creates smoke because you, in order to get the color of the dye, you cook up berries and other things. So this is different. Okay, we can even look at Rashi. Rashi says, dirashane. Rashi explains, chanuk berefet diratan shel adam him. Okay, these are generally places where people live, different than nowadays where it's not the case. Rashi says, we're not going to forbid you to live in the place where you want to live and do what you want to do in your living space unless it's really causing damage, which is if the storehouse is already there. But if it's not there yet, you don't have to worry that maybe they'll build a storehouse there. Daikanami, and one can further support this, that it's different. This case is different from all the others. The Tane Allah, right? Because all the others we basically said that it's really in any case, even if there isn't. But now this one really is uniquely only if there's an otzar already. If not, you could do it. But it's unique because of dira. And there's a braita on this which doesn't appear by any of the others that says if first you had the barn there for the animals and then they built the storage house, you'd be allowed to do that because they would know coming in. So since it's only said here, we assume the exception is only in this case. Source number 6. Okay, now we're jumping to a Mishnah on Daf Kafaf. No, sorry. Yeah, Kafaf. Okay. Lo yita adam ilan samuch l'sadeh, elen ken irchik mimenu arba amot. You can't plant a tree next to a field unless you distance yourself 4 cubits. B'tane alan, it's said on this braita, on this Mishnah, sorry. Arba amot shamru kedei avodat keren. The reason why you have to leave space in the field of 4 cubits is because of the work they have to do in the field, and they have to usually they would work with animals and other things. You need space to be able to get through. You need like an aisle. So what do you see here? Tamam mishum kedei avodat keren. Halav mishum kedei avodat keren samech. But if it weren't for that, you'd be able to put it next to it. Even though, right, you're in the end, you're planting a tree right next to your neighbor, that could cause a problem. The roots could go into their property and make issues. Right? Even though there's roots that could damage. To which they answer, this must be the case where you build put stones in the ground underneath, and that would prevent your roots from getting into their side. And then the only reason you need to distance it 4 cubits is so that the person in their field has room to plow, or get by with animals for whatever thing they need it for, but not if the roots could get there. If the roots could get there, then for sure you'd have to distance it, and that would fit with Rava, that even if it didn't exist, right, you still have to move. And if there's no other issue, you still have to keep your distance from your neighbor's space, because they might cause them damage. Now they're going to say, some people take out the words daikanami de katane, but either which way, this is further proof that this is true, that there's sunma, that you put rocks in the middle, because hayagadir bein time, it continues and says, if there was a fence in between, zeh somech legader mikam, v'zeh somech legader mikam. And there we see that, right? This is, I think the issue is here, 1 second. Katane, yeah. So this basically shows that if there's a fence between it, then it's not an issue. Okay, then you can each put it right up against, just like we just explained. Ihachi, but then they said, wait a minute, but then something doesn't jive here, because Ema Seifa, Hayusha Rashav Yotzim B'toch Shel Chavero, Ma'amik Lahen Shlosha Tvachim. it says in the continuation there, but wait, if the roots were getting down into your friend's field, so you have to get rid of the ones that are 3 tfachim, right, in the top 3 tfachim of the ground, so that it doesn't cause problems in the plow share when they're using it, gets stuck on the roots. Now, didn't we just say that there's stones in between? If there's stones in between, then how could you possibly end up with roots in the other field? My bauhatam, what are they doing there? To which they say no. This is how to read that source. Hachikama. Ilav tsunma vehayusho עכשיו יוצאים לתוך של חברו, מעמיק 3 טפחים, כדי שלא יעכב המחרשה. That the end part of that, okay, it'll be more clear if you look at the Mishnah there. Kafva. Lo yita adam ilan sabuch l'sadeh chavero elan kenochit mimeno arbat amot. Right. First, it says don't plant a tree next to your field unless you distance arba amot, which we explained later was because it says right. The reason is because of the kerem, right? The people have to get by and do the work. Right. I'm just saying, right. That's the Tane Allah. There was a braita that explained arba amot shamru k'dei avodat kerem. That was a braita. Then the Mishnah continues and says, I'm skipping, okay, it doesn't matter, vineyard or tree, or vine tree. Haya gadir bein tahim, which explained, right, that if there was a fence in between, you can put it right up against, we're not worried, which explained how we explained the first one. And then it says, okay, but the roots, if the root, skipped a few words, right? If they get into your neighbor's field, you just have to make sure they're deep in the ground so that they don't cause any problems. So here you see, they're going to have to say, how did they get there if we just said there was sunma and the whole Mishnah was talking about where you put stones in between? To which they answer that the second part of that Mishnah is saying, if though you didn't have, and the roots did get there, you'd have to make sure that there were no roots in the top 3 tefachim of the ground, because that will create problems. They'll have damage to them, to their plowshare while they're plowing. Okay, that's this section. Tashma, source number 7. Marchikim et ha'ilam min habor 25 amot. Okay, now we're in a Mishnah that's on a Talmud bet, I believe. And it says here you have to distance your tree from a bore, from a well, 25 amot. It sounds like only because there's a bore there. If there wasn't a bore, you could put it right next to it. Again, going against Rava. Even if there wasn't a bore, you still couldn't put it near him. So again, what's it teaching you? This goes back to all the earlier ones. They want you to know that the distance that generally it could just destroy a bore, ruin it, would be 25 cubits. But wait a minute. Look at the end of that Mishnah. It says, if the tree was there first, then you don't have to cut it. Now, this seems very clearly against Rava. Rava says you don't have to worry about the future. And here it says, well, you planted it within 25 cubits of your neighbor, then your neighbor put a bore there, you're okay. But Rava says you're not okay. You shouldn't put it there in the first place. Right? Idolo samech, if you didn't put it near him, as if you're not allowed to put it nearby, like we explained, that we explained the Mishnah according to Rava, then how could you possibly end up with this situation? To which they're going to say, just like Rav Papa says about the next source, we can apply that to here, which we didn't see yet, but Kedam Rav Papa, bilokeach, hachanami bilokeach. What's the case? So we can read a Rashi, helps us understand it. Hachanami bilokeach, about 15 lines from the bottom or 12 lines from the bottom of Rashi on the page. Adam shenata ilan betoch sadehu, va'achar kach machal chatzi sadehu li'ish achim. So a person plants a tree in the field and then sold half the field. In other words, the whole field belonged to you at some point. So you planted your tree, it was okay because it was in your own field. It wasn't near the neighbor's field. But then you sold the part of the field that was 25 cubits away from this tree. So the tree was planted, you were totally permitted. Later, that land became not yours, and now the tree's within 25 cubits, and if they put a bore there after you sold it to them, that's not your problem. They knew going in that your tree was there, and that becomes their problem. Okay, so just like what Papa said in a different case, which we'll see, we can apply that here as well. Tashma. Marchikim et hamishra min hayarak. Okay, we're up to a Mishnah in also Kaf Hamid Bet. Marchikim et hamishra min hayarak or min hayarek. Okay, you have to move. Now we're going to see three things that have to be moved, one from the other. You can't soak your flax. People would make a hole in the ground and fill it with water and soak their flax in it. You can't do that. That was to make the linen clothes. You can't do that. You have to distance it from vegetation. And leeks from onions. And hardal, mustard from dvulim, from bees. So each of these things, what they want to tell you is, right, each one causes damage to the other. So therefore you have to, one, this causes damage to that, this causes damage to that, this causes damage to that. Therefore, don't, right, you have to distance them. Now, tamadi kayarak samich. This again sounds like you don't have to distance where you're soaking your flax from your neighbor's field. You just have to distance it if they happen to have vegetables growing there. And likewise the krishin, right, the leeks, and likewise the mustard. To which they say, right, ki lekayerek, nami lo samich. Again, they're going to say, no, even if there wasn't vegetables there, you still wouldn't be able to put it near there. Baha kamash, what they want to teach you is hanikashla hadadi. The reason why they said, don't put your leeks near the onions just really means don't put the leeks near your neighbor. They wanted you to know it's because leeks are bad for onions and they might plant onions there, etc. So now the Gemara says, wait, this is the problem because he hachi ema seifa. But look at the end of that source. It says, Rabbi Yossi matir bechardal. He permits it with mustard, the mustard with the bees. Mipnei she'achol amar lo ad shata omer li harchek chardalai min dvai, harchek dvai min chardalai. It's a two-way street. If you want me to move my mustard, I could say, hey, you move your bees. Your bees are attacking my mustard. So it goes in both ways. If you remove your bees, I'll remove my mustard. So, because they come and they eat my mustard seeds. And that's what we're concerned about them eating. Now, what's the problem here? Now, if it wasn't nearby, right? In other words, if the bees weren't there to begin with, and it's just telling me I can't put my mustard there, I can't plant my mustard seeds there. Well, Rabbi Yossi makes no sense. Because Rabbi Yossi is saying that it's the reason I don't have to move them is because I could say move your bees. Now, if your bees aren't there, because it's telling me don't put my mustard there in the first place, then if I can't plant my mustard, then I can't claim, oh, I don't have to move my mustard because you have to move your bees when your bees don't even exist. What we're basically saying is the way we explain the source to fit with Rava was that I can't plant my mustard seeds there even if you don't have bees. And yet Rabbi Yossi is talking about where there obviously were bees. So something doesn't work there to explain that that's the case in the Mishnah. And therefore, this comes in Rav Papa, Amar Rav Papa, Bilokach. Papa says it must be where, again, all of the land belonged to me. I planted my mustard seeds. It was permitted. Then you came along and bought part of the land, and then you put your bees there. And then Rabbi Yossi now says, when you come and tell me uproot your mustard, I could say, hey, you got to get rid of your bees. Now, but what's the problem? We're now going to have two questions with Rav Papa. What's the problem? Number one, we're going to say, my tamid Rabbanan. Okay, wait a minute. If I was able to do this in the first place, then why did the rabbis say that with the mustard, I have to get rid of my mustard? I planted my mustard. It was totally okay, I did. And then I sold it to you. You put your bees in. Why do I have to move my mustard? Because they thought I do. And because, right, remember, Tanakama said, marchikim, right? The leeks from the onions, the mustard from the bees, and the other case as well, right? So the place where I'm soaking my flax, from the vegetables. So that's number one. If I was allowed to do it in the first place, then why would I have to move it? Ve'od. In other words, again, I came there first. It was all mine. So I didn't plant it near your field. And you came later and bought it and then put your stuff in. So why is it my responsibility? And ve'od, furthermore, my tamid Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi also doesn't fully make sense. Rabbi Yossi says my claim that I could say move your bees is only true for the bees and the mustard. But afilu mishravi yarkanami. Theoretically, all of them, if I bought it, owned it first, and then sold it to you, and I planted everything beheter, it was permitted to me, why on earth would I have to move the other ones? Shouldn't have to move any of them. So we're now going to have three different explanations, three different solutions to resolving this. The first is Ravina. I'm a Ravina. And with that, we'll finish today's daf. Kasavre Rabbanan. Okay, now, first of all, I should say, I'm going with one explanation, Rashi's, which is that these three answers are really answering the question to reestablish everything like Rav Papa said. Some people have the girsa that says, Ela Ama Ravina, and it was a total rejection of Rav Papa. It's not talking about Lokach, it's talking about a different situation and giving a different answer entirely. But we're going to stick with, this is all within Rav Papa that's a Lokach, and now we're going to answer these two questions we just had. Again, if it's a Lokach, then why do the rabbis not allow it? Like, why do I have to move my original thing that I planted perfectly in a permitted manner if you brought your thing later? And why would Rabbi Yossi distinguish between the mustard and the bees and the other cases? So I'm a Ravina. Kasavi Rabbanan alamazik larchiket atzmo. So now we're going to explain the first explanation is, what's the debate between them? Well, the rabbis think whoever's causing the damage has to move it. And Rabbi Yossi, so now the obvious would be, Michlal de Rabbi Yossi savar alanizak larchiket atzmo, right? Well, then Rabbi Yossi holds the one who is being damaged. If you're having damage happen to your produce, then you have to move it. Now, especially if we say that this is all within Rav Papa, especially if I planted it in a way that was permitted, and then you came later, well, then you have to move it. And Rabbanan say, no, even though I planted my stuff, it was permitted, but if my stuff is causing damage, I'll have to move it, right? You can imagine. It's a classic argument among neighbors of, your stuff is damaging my property. Iyal hanizak, but wait, but something doesn't jive about this. If we assume that the machloket is alamazik or the nizak, who has to move it and distance their stuff, well, if it's on the nizak, the one who's being damaged, and again, the mustard guy says, well, you go move your bees, well, then it should be true for the flax, right? The flax guy could say, I'm not moving my flax, where it's soaking, you go move your vegetables. So now we're going to say, both the mustard and the dvorim each bother each other, okay? Those two things damage the other. That's the difference, okay? Those two things cause damage one to the other, which means the damage goes in both directions. With the Mishra is not affected by the vegetables that are grown. So that's why. Rabbanan, dvorim l'chadal lo maskele. And the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Yossi. So and we're going to say, right, that 1 second. Sorry, I think I skipped a line. Okay, let's start again. So really, Rabbi Yossi holds it's on the mazik also. If you cause damage, you have to move it. And this is what Rabbi Yossi said to the rabbis. So Rabbi Yossi says to the rabbis, I get Mishra and Yarka. Okay, this the flax and the vegetables. Rabbi Yossi says, I agree with you. Why? Because hani maskehani, v'hani lo maskehani. Because the flax and the soaking of it affects, the liquid and the moisture all affects the growing of the vegetables, but the vegetables don't affect the flax. But when it comes to the mustard and the bees, it goes in both directions. And that's why, again, that makes perfect sense with what he said, in fact. So it's not mazik nizak. They both think mazik. It's just the mazik goes in two directions in that case. And that explains really Rabbi Yossi, who makes this distinction between that case and all the others. But Rabbanan, so how the rabbis, don't think it's two directions? Yeah, they don't. They think that the bees don't affect the mustard. Why? If it's the mustard seeds, they can't find them. They're in the ground, or they're in they're hidden there. They can't even get to them. If they eat the leaves, they'll just grow back. They regrow, so it doesn't really matter. But we're going to have a problem with this answer as well, because something else doesn't jive here with a different source that we know. In other words, what we did here in the second explanation, again, first explanation was mazik nizak. Who's responsible? Reject that. We say, no. Even Rabbi Yossi thinks we're all responsible. Otherwise, he'd be told across the board in all three cases. Then we said mazik nizak. We said mazik. Mazik always is, if your thing is damaging, you have to move it. That explains all the other cases. What's the difference for according to Rabbi Yossi? That the bees also affect the mustard. To which the rabbis disagree and think it's a difference in reality. What's really the truth? They have a difference about the truth. What's the truth? It's not an opinion. It's maybe you call it opinion, but do they affect or do they not affect the mustard? Yeah. Right? Can they damage it? Or do we call that damage? But now we have a problem because according to this, Rabbi Yossi holds alamazik larchik et atzmo. Is that really true? V'savar Rabbi Yossi alamazik larchik et atzmo v'hatnan. It says in the Mishna. Rabbi Yossi omer, apapi. Okay, this is also on Kaf Hamid. Apapi sha'abol kotemet ilan lo yikotz. Even if the boar came before the tree, you don't have to cut it. Shezeh chofer b'toch shelo v'zeh notea b'toch shelo. Each person has free. What do you say? Free. The word has free choice. You can build whatever you want on your own property. You don't have to worry about anything. So he obviously doesn't think that someone who's causing damage to another has to get rid of their thing. Otherwise, the tree person would have to cut down their tree, right? Because the boar was there first. The tree guy would have to cut it down. So you'd have to say, Elolam Rabbi Yossi ala nizak tzvi relay. Rabbi Yossi really thinks if your item's getting damaged and you're having a problem with it, well, that's your responsibility. If you don't want it to get damaged, get rid of it, move it, distance it. Now, how do we explain then why he distinguishes between the bees and the other cases? Very simply, we're going to say, L'divreihem de Rabbanan kamar lehu. He was speaking according to the opinion of the rabbis. L'didi, according to me, ala nizak larchik et atzmo. I really think that there's no one, you don't need to move your stuff if it's causing damage. I don't think so. But, right, afilu mishra v'yar kelobai rifuke, right? I don't need you to move your flax soaking thing from the vegetables either. But, so even though he said he disagreed only about one, he wasn't talking according to his opinion. According to his opinion, nobody needs to move their stuff. Only if you don't want to be damaged, so move your thing. But, l'ditchu, according to them, damaritu ala mazik. But according to you, who think it's on the mazik, tinach mishra v'yarka dahani mazke v'hani lo mazke hani. Ela chardalu dvorim travayu mazke adade. I get with the flax. And the other case we saw that, okay, the damage, right, with the leeks and the onions, it's only one directional. So I understand. You claim, again, according to your theory. But according to your theory, if the one who's causing damage has to move, in the mustard with the bees, the damage goes in both directions. So you can't say the mustard guy has to move his stuff because the person with the bees also should have to move their stuff. So basically, one can't force the other to distance their stuff, according to you, is what Rabbi Yossi is saying. I think none of them need to, because that's my opinion. And what do the rabbis respond? What we already saw in the rabbis' response, which we explained before. The bees don't actually affect the mustard. If it seeds, they can't find them. And if it's the leaves, well, they'll just regrow. They regenerate. So it's not an issue. Okay, so that's our daf for today. Pretty straightforward. We're going to just do a quick review. We had 8 sources, all from mishnayot in our chapter, that all seem to go against Rava, who claims that if you want to put it in your other friend's border, you can't, anything that could cause damage, even if they don't have anything there that's being damaged, like a wall, a bore, right, a pit, or any of those things. But all these sources seem to say otherwise, but we explained all of them in some other way. Okay, either it's a unique circumstance or it's because it really isn't necessarily have to be a wall there. It just was telling you this damages walls and this damages that and this damages that. The last one, we had to get a little bit off on some tangents because once we figured out the second explanation we brought, which was for Papa, that's trying about a lokach, then we had some other issues that came up. How do you explain this machlok at the rabbis and Rabbi Yossi, to which we came up with 3 attempts, right? Till we finally, the third attempt seemed to be the right one about what the debate between them is and why they hold with their opinions and why Rabbi Yossi distinguished between one case and all the others. Again, he wasn't really talking about according to his opinion. He was just responding according to you, rabbis. You should at least agree with me about this one case. With that, we finished for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov.